briefly, the areas at the juncture of several tectonic plates, that creates a lot of upheaval, a lot of very interesting layering of soils. You can see the ridges that are running in the north-south there in the Google video photograph. At the edges of tectonic plates, you have a tendency to have ultramafic, or in this case serpentinite bedrock, which gets shoved up. And as that gets shoved up on the edge of the tectonic plates, and that serpentinite starts to erode and get weathered, that creates soils that are high in a variety of very harsh minerals. So these are two features that really, really drive what is going on in the valley. So next slide, please. So Walker Ridge is the ridge that runs along the west side of the valley. Very high amounts of serpentine soils up there. These are steep and rocky areas, and this erosion is a major feature of what you see in these areas. Those soils flow down into the valley, so the alluvial fans into the valley actually have a very high amount of serpentine soils. Serpentine soils have low calcium to magnesium ratios, low levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, high concentrations of heavy metals, which are very toxic to many types of plants. So what we find are a lot of the native plants in this area can tolerate various degrees of serpentine, and the non-native plants, a lot of the grasses from Europe and Asia, don't do well in those types of soils. So this tends to keep the non-natives to a lower degree, and the native plants that are adapted to this do quite well. Again, I'm skipping over this pretty quickly because I want to get to the pretty pictures here. Next slide, please. The California Rangeland Trust has set up conservation easements for a large percentage of the valley. I'm not sure exactly how many acres the valley itself is, but my calculation comes out that those 4 ranches that are under a conservation easement takes up the great majority of the valley. And yes, there is grazing out there, cattle, some horses, and they manage this in a way to actually enhance the growth of the native plants. The rates of how many cattle they put on, and when they put the cattle on, things like this are managed in such a way to promote the growth of the native plants in the area. So if you can go to the next one, please. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of start from the south end of the valley, from Highway 16 and 20, and work our way north through that, because you have a number of different habitats that you run into. This particular picture is actually just outside the valley. It's right there at the junction of 16 and 20. This was in 2014. Sometimes you get this really massive display of California poppies there. It's interesting to watch this area to see how much variation you get from one year to the next. This year, there were pretty much no poppies at all there. So the rainfall patterns, temperature patterns have a major effect on what you'll see out there. Next slide, please. Okay, so when you enter the valley, you take Bear Valley Road, that's Highway 20 there in the background. And really a good indication of how things are going is this corral that you see right there by the cattle guard as you start to enter the road. Those are tidy tips, and I'm not sure which of the species of tidy tips that this particular site is. Generally, I can tell if there's going to be a good bloom, there's a lot of tidy tips at this spot. So next slide, please. Okay, so as you head into the hilly section, you're going along Bear Creek. You'll see a lot of cattle. You'll see a lot of, again, there's poppies from those are from 2016. And along the creek, we see a lot of tamarisk. And tamarisk is a non-native, very invasive plant, which I'm very unhappy to see here, because it doesn't provide good habitat for wildlife. It essentially sucks water out of the ground. It's amazing how much water that can consume. But you do see a mixture of things here. This is a habitat for several endangered species of animals, including some of the endangered frogs. I'll have to admit that I don't get down into the creek very often, so I don't have a lot of pictures of flowers down there. So if you can go to the next one, please. So that's Bear Creek, which does flow eventually into Cache Creek. Sometimes the water can be quite milky because the Wilbur Hot Springs is just upstream from this. You don't want to go fishing there because, again, those serpentine soils with the high amounts of dangerous toxic minerals, the water can be quite high in a variety of minerals, as well as a lot of mercury there. It's not the greatest picture of redbud, but I wanted to very often you will hear people talk about how there's all this wonderful redbud along the creek, and I want to show you the difference between redbud and the tamarisk that you can tell from a distance. You can tell which one you're looking at. So lots of times when you're looking at this, you'll see, when people say there's redbud, it's actually the tamarisk. Next slide, please. The clematis, there's a couple of species of clematis. This is pipestem clematis. There's also Virgin's bower in the area, which is a different species. Find that along the creek and along the roadside. Okay, let's see, next one. As you go further in, it starts to get really dry and hilly. This is mostly sandstone and shale with outcroppings of serpentine through there. The road's very narrow, and you don't want to go to in this area after a really heavy rain, because the dirt road can be very rutted and hard to get through. In really, really rainy years, there can be some landslides that block the road, so you do want to be careful. Most of the time, it's relatively easy to get through there. You don't need a four-wheel drive vehicle to get through here in most cases. There's a lot of botanizing you can do alongside the roads and in some of these little canyons that go up the side. Just keep in mind that a lot of the area around here is private property, so you don't want to be going across any barbed wire fences into areas. These soils are fairly dry and harsh, and you have chaparral. But we will find a number of interesting species. What we have is a large variety of species of wildflowers, but not large volumes of any particular one as you go through here. Next slide, please. So what you'll see in these areas are paintbrush. The most common one I'll see is the Castanea foliosa. You can tell that one because it has kind of a dusty color to it. It's fuzzy and a slight gray. We've also seen wavy leaf paintbrush, Castanea applegate. It looks like we lost one of our slides. One of our slides went backwards. I had an updated version of that one. It's the one I think in the area is Castanea applegate subspecies martini. Martin's paintbrush. But again, when you're looking at these, the red in this is not the actual flower. Those are the bracts or modified leaves. The flowers themselves are if you look in there, you can see some little gray, greenish yellow pointy things sticking out, and those are the actual flowers in that inflorescence. The foliosa, the woolly Indian paintbrush, has a high affinity for serpentine. We'll see that quite a bit in serpentine soils. Okay, next slide, please. One low-growing plant that you'll see on the hillsides along the roads are the acnosphon. These two species are hard to tell apart, and I'm not 100% sure that I have the right species on these. I believe the one on the left is the Chilean trefoil. I have no idea why they call it Chilean trefoil, because it's a native California plant or what North American plant. The foothill deer vetch on the right. The difference between these are pretty microscopic differences between the hairs on the leaves there. The easiest way to tell them apart is by their seed pods, and when they're actively flowering, we don't see a lot of seeds on them. So those are my best guesses at which species these are. Most likely it's the one on the left is the most common one in the area. Next slide, please. Let's see. There we go. Lupins. Lots of different lupins out there. There's another 4 or 5 species beyond what I show here that are in the area. Lupins can be really hard to identify the species, especially from photographs, because you have to get down to some small features internal to the flowers. Sky lupin, actually, we'll see more of those out in the valley, big masses, fields of that in some years. The chick lupin is a fairly common one. The one this year, the most common one we saw along the roadside was the white whorl lupin, the one in the top center. A lot of those along the roadside. Lupins are also kind of tough because there's at least 50 species of lupins in California, and Caltrans in the past would spread lupin seeds along the sides of cut road banks throughout the state. So it's hard to know sometimes if you have a native lupin for that area or not. But these lupins are always fun to see, and this is a good area to see them. Okay, next please. Give me a second while I catch up. Foothill poppy. I'll show you how to distinguish this from a California poppy a little later on. In this case, they tend to be a lighter color, but that isn't necessarily the best way to identify the different species of poppies. Foothill poppies tend to be on slopes. California poppies can be on slopes or down in the valley floor. In the harsher soils along the hillsides here, almost always what we're seeing are the foothill poppies. The difference is underneath the flower, and I'll show you later when I have a picture of the California poppy. I'll show you how you can tell the difference between those. Next slide. Okay, onions. Lots of onions in the area. Onions really like serpentine soils. The Purdy's onion there, which is a somewhat rare plant, 90% of the populations of Purdy's onion are on serpentine soil, so that really likes serpentine. All of these are predominantly found in serpentine soils. This year, the jeweled onion was the one that we saw the most common. Found these in further up on the hillsides along the road driving into the valley. Tend not to see those down in the valley as much. These really are going to be in the drier areas on the hillsides going in. There's a couple of other species of onions, but I haven't come across those on this drive yet. Let's see, next we have. Okay, ethereal spear. I used to call the name I used to use for this was Wally basket, and but I don't know, for Wally basket's not as popular a name anymore. Ethereal spear is very common throughout California. We'll tend to see that in grassy slopes, but not in serpentine. So this is one of the ways when you're looking at hillsides, you kind of tell what the soils are by looking at what the plants are. And generally you won't find this as much on the serpentine. Very beautiful plant. Not a lot of them there. You see more of those like in Silver Spur in those areas. It's much more common. Next ones. Okay. a variety of composite flowers. Composites can be tough sometimes to identify from photographs because very often you need to have shots of the underside of the flower, of the leaves, things like this. And I'm not including photographs of all the diagnostic characteristics in this slideshow because that would make us take 6-7 hours to go through everything. The mountain dandelion at the top is a serpentine-loving plant. The others tend not to be. The common woolly sunflower is really common along the cut banks on the roads going in. It likes disturbed soils. The mule's ears tend to be back up in some of the draws and canyons, a little bit off the road. The difference between the two mule's ears, the narrow leaf mule's ear has a much narrower leaf, which is reasonable. Smooth mule ears leaves tend to be really hairy, fuzzy, but the smooth one is very, very slick and not fuzzy. Those are the mule ears flowers can be 6 to 9 inches across or more.
Charlie, can you quickly describe what a composite flower is, please?
Okay, so if we're looking at, look at that lower right-hand one, for example, the narrow mule ears. That's actually several hundred flowers, individual flowers grouped together in a head. So you have the rays that are going around, those are specialized flowers called ray flowers. Each petal out there is a separate flower. The center, you have a cluster of what we'll call disc flowers, and those are the ones that are going to be generally and almost always creating being pollinated and creating the seeds. So you have a head that with a receptacle of platforms essentially, and a number of these flowers clustered together in your typical daisy type of format. Now there's many variations of this, but instead of being single flowers or a cluster of flowers on separate stems, you have these grouped together, and that's a very poor way to describe it. It would, if I'm sitting here waving my hand in the air, which you can't see because I don't have my camera on, but it's easier to show with a diagram. But one of the problems with field botany with composite flowers is they have their own whole different set of terminology of how to describe flower parts. When you're keying out composite flowers, you use a lot of different terms and structures than you do with other types of flowers. So when they're teaching plant taxonomy, composites tend to be, you'll have a whole separate class on those. And you may notice that I don't have a lot of grass pictures in here because, again, grasses are yet in a whole different realm, and I'm still working on learning my grasses, so not a lot of pictures of those in here.
Charlie, what is the best time of year to see mule ear blossoms?
That depends on where you are, because it depends on the elevation. We have mule's ears are found in the valley floor, in the foothills, up in the Sierras, all the way up to some pretty high elevations in the Sierras. If you want to see a lot of mule's ears, Mount Lassen has hillsides covered with them at the right time of year, which I think it's a little early for those yet. And it depends a lot on the rainfall because they are very sensitive to the amount of rainfall we have. Mule's ears aren't super common ones in Bear Valley. This wouldn't be my first choice of places to go. This year we found that's the smooth mule ears was from this year. We found one roadside stop on the canyon end that had some, and it was very fortunate that we found it because I was looking at something else and we said, what's that yellow spot way up on the hillside? And I was able to struggle up to there because it was in one of the open areas and found this one blooming plant. So mule's ears, higher elevations, you'll find larger displays of those. Carson Pass in July would be a good, on some areas in Carson Pass would be a good area. Okay, next slide, please. Calencia, Chinese houses. This is one that we see a lot in the Berryessa area, Snow Mountain. You can get some massive displays of this. Usually this is in a more shady area. They tend to be in damper areas or hillsides that had a lot of water to start with, but not always. The few flowered blue-eyed Mary there, which is related to it, but they don't have these big heads like the purple Chinese houses. That is a serpentine-loving one. That's one of Roxanne's pictures. I actually didn't realize that I found some of those this year, and I discarded the pictures because I thought that they were just poor copies of the Chinese houses. So I wasn't careful, and I lost some of my photos of that. And fortunately, Roxanne got those. So the few flowered blue-eyed Mary you'll see more on the drier hillsides. The purple Chinese houses you'll see in the draws. A couple of years ago, there was a fire that went through one of the areas, the Redbud Trail, which Nate, you're familiar with. And the year after the fire went through there were massive amounts of the Chinese houses there. It doesn't like being in places where there's a lot of grass. If there's a lot of grasses, it doesn't compete very well. Next slide. Phacelias, caterpillar plants. To be able to identify these, you have to see the leaves, and you have to know what type of habitat they're in. These are really tough ones to photograph because they bloom in succession along that curled inflorescence there. So very often you'll have some nice pretty ones blooming on one end, but on the other end there's a whole bunch of dead ones in there, and it makes it hard to get the pretty photos. So I was fortunate with these. And you'll see those are hillside ones, grassy hillsides.
Are these related to fiddlenecks?
Yes, they are. They're in the same family, Boraginaceae, and you can see that fiddleneck kind of pattern there. Sometimes the fiddleneck is very, very tightly coiled, like that one at the bottom, and you don't really see the fiddleneck feature there. But if you poke at that a little bit, you'll see that it's there. Very, very distinctively. And if you look at the shape of the flower, a lot of things very similar to your fiddlenecks. Next one, please. Purple nightshade. For now, we're going to call this one Solanum parisiae, but apparently the botanists are reorganizing the Solanum, this genus, and they're going to rename everything and reclassify them just to make people like me get frustrated. A hillside plant, we don't see a lot of those, but we had some. These are from well, we saw this year as well as some other years, but not a lot of them there. Okay. And sticky monkey flower, also called bush monkey flower. Some areas in California, there are masses of these. Could be a fairly large bush. Don't see as many of these because they like the hilly areas, and you know, people are tending to zoom fast through the hilly area trying to get out to the valley. Actually, a very pretty plant. Okay, what's next here? Okay, a plant that people tend to miss or ignore, Q-tips. We're talking about something that's 3-4 inches tall. Looks like it just looks like it's a bunch of fuzz on the ground. You get down close and you see the fuzz actually is this flowering plant. Tends to be in disturbed areas right along the roads. And chia sage. It's one of the 2 species where we get the edible chia seeds from. This is found throughout California and down into Mexico. It's probably used a little less than the other species of chia, which the Salvia columbariae. Oh, this is Salvia columbariae. Salvia hispanica is a little more commonly used for the edible seeds. Again, scattered in dry areas. And let's see, there you go. Next one after that, please. There we go. Wildflowers. The wildflowers really stand out, and this year there was a lot of them along the road going in. They are tall, a fairly tall plant, so they stand out above the grasses. They like the disturbed areas, the cut banks and stuff going on the way in. And you come along and they just stand out like a beacon. They're related to in the mustard family. You can see by the seed pods and that they have the 4 petals there. Actually, just a really fun plant to find because it shows up such bright color. Next one. Okay. Madias, these are, again, composite flowers. You can see the rays and the disc in the center. I'm not 100% sure I have the right name on the grassy tarweed on the side. It's either Madia gracilis or Madia exigua. Those are a little tough. That's a small flower. That's probably, a 1/4 inch or so across. The Madia elegans, it's really interesting because usually when you see that, there's a zone of red color around on the ray flowers surrounding the center or surrounding the disc. And you can see there's just a hint of red there. It's still common Madia, and the ones in this area tend not to have that red center. But it's just a regional variation that we see. That took me a while to figure out because the first thing you're looking for is that red center. Okay, let's see what else we have next. Live Forevers, also called rock lettuce. Picture on the right is one that Roxanne took this year. A nice succulent type plant. You have to get really close to see the real beauty of these things. I love taking close-up pictures of the flower heads. We generally avoid telling people where we find these. I know where specifically this was, and we avoid giving very specific locations because in the past couple of years, we have major problems with plant rustlers coming in and digging these up to box them up to send them to Asia. All of the succulents of this sort, the native succulents in California, are being essentially attacked by collectors because they're there's a major interest in these in generally in Asia. Down on the coast, they were they pulled over a van and they found a boxed species of these in there that they had something on the order of 1,000 plants in their car that they were boxing up to send overseas. So we'll talk about general areas, but we don't hand out specific locations for these plants anymore. You find these on exposed rocks. They're fairly common in rocky areas throughout Northern California, tend to be more on the coastal areas. They're not really a serpentine one, so you'll see them more on the shale and sandstone areas. Let's see, what's next? Small plants. Okay, I really like photographing really small plants because things that people pass by and they may not notice, and I'm down on my hands and knees down there with my close-up lens trying to get pictures. The one on the right, the dot seed plantain, that's 1 inch or 2 inches tall, and it doesn't look very interesting until you get really close and look at the flowers. I think that's a very interesting plant. It's a very important plant because that is the host plant for the larva of the Edith's checker spot. And in fact, down in the Bay Area, there is a subspecies of the checker spot, the Bay checker spot, which is a federally listed and threatened species, and its primary host plant for the host for the caterpillars is this particular native plantain. So we don't have that super rare butterfly in the valley here, but there are checker spots there. That is not my photo of a checker spot. That's one that I took from Wikipedia just for illustration purpose. I do a lot better photographing flowers that tend to sit in one spot than I do butterflies that move around a lot. Silver puffs, people tend to think of that as a weed, but it is a native plant. That's a seed head there on the left, your dandelion type of seed. There's another composite flower. We'll see those in disturbed areas alongside. Oops, there we go. Sorry, I'm running my slideshow in parallel, so I have to catch up with Nate. We do have some parasitic plants you'll see in the area. Dodder is really hard to get down to species. You need the flowers, and the flowers are really small. There are a couple flowers in this shot, but they're really, really hard to tell without a dissecting scope. If you go along the road and it looks like someone's been spraying orange silly string all across the plants, that's the dodder. More often than not, it's a native plant. There are some non-natives in California, but you more commonly see these. They do not kill the plants. If you're a parasite and you kill your host, it's not a good survival mechanism. They're just visually unattractive. That plant essentially has no roots. It's totally dependent on its host. It'll set seed. The seed will drop in the ground. The next spring it'll come up. It does have a root for a short period of time, just long enough to hold it up until it can wrap itself around a plant, and then the roots wither away. The one on the left, the dwarf mistletoe, back before the drought, that was probably the major pest of pine trees in Northern California. Now with the drought and the bark beetles getting started, the bark beetles are a bigger problem. But dwarf mistletoe doesn't kill the tree, but it creates, the tree tries to grow around these infected sites, and you get these what we call witch's broom structures, these big ugly clumps of branches, and essentially it destroys the economic value of the tree. So there was and they're actually a very interesting plant. The seeds are dispersed by hygroscopic pressure, so that the fruit builds up some water pressure in there, and then they'll pop the seed off and it'll fly over to the next tree and stick to that. One of my major professors when I was a student at UC Davis did a lot of work on dwarf mistletoe, and when she would be working in the field with this, she would have a face shield over, because these things pop off with such force that it would strike her and they actually hurt. So that's something you'll see in the area. Okay, let's go on. So as you move out of the hilly area, you start to get into the valley, and on the edge of the valley you have these rolling hills, and it's quite beautiful. But again, this is all pasture land. It's all fenced off. You have to look at things from the road. So all these shots are roadside shots. Hopefully the plants grow right up to the road so you get a chance to look at them. The one on the left there is one of Roxanne's pictures. Those are gold fields. I'm not sure which species, because they're really hard to tell species. The soils around here are coming mostly from the eastern side, so they are lower in serpentine than other areas of the valley. So we're not seeing a lot of the serpentine loving plants here. that photo on the right side, that's all Chinese houses. You know, I mentioned how Chinese houses usually is in the shadier areas, but this is a hillside that was just covered with them. That hillside was probably there may be a little bit of water up there because this is a fairly water-loving, damp soil-loving plant. And you get these beautiful displays of flowers. Okay, so let's see what's next. Blue dicks, they're starting to go through, they've decided to rename this from Dichelostema over to Dipterostemon. So if blue dicks, if that name came from the dick part of Dichelostema, we're going to have to start calling this blue dips, I think. So this is probably one of the most common grassland plants you'll see in Northern California. Early season, it's a very valuable plant to the Native Americans. It has a corm, which is a bulb-like structure, which is edible, and it's just found all over the place. It's a beautiful plant, but you do have to, there are some very similar ones to this, so you have to look at some details to be able to identify whether it's blue dicks or one of the other similar plants. Okay, one of my favorite kinds of plants, Calicortis. This one's Diogenes lantern, or it's also called golden fairy lantern or golden globe lily. Wonderful plants. The entire plant itself is probably 9 inches, 10 inches tall. Fairly large flowers. They stand out quite a bit. They like open areas, not a lot of grass. They don't compete well with grasses. I see a lot in areas that burn. We'll see a lot of these come in because if there's a fire, it suppresses the grasses the next year, and these guys really take advantage of that. Same thing, I mentioned the Chinese houses on the Redbud Trail. We had masses of these at the Redbud Trail when the grasses were burned a number of years ago. Very nice flower, found only in California. A lot of places in Northern California. Okay, next, death camas. It is a poisonous plant. Not to handle, it's something you don't want to eat. I'm working on trying to identify the different species. The difference between the various species of this are fairly subtle. And I believe that I have Fremont's death camas on the right and the small flowered star lily or death camas on the left, but that's hard to tell from the photos here. Fairly common one, what's it, Pierce Canyon Road up in Capey Valley. We had a big bloom of these last year right after the fire. Fairly common. You'll see that, again, a lot of these in the grasslands. The ranchers aren't necessarily thrilled with this particular one, but because it's not great for cattle grazing. But a very pretty one, especially if you start getting down close and looking at them. There's probably at least 3 species of this in the area. Fiddleneck, we mentioned fiddleneck before. There's a nice shot that shows you the coil of that, similar to the Phacelia before. Fiddleneck is a native plant. It's not, again, it's not something that the ranchers like to see because it is toxic to cattle, to a small degree. I love taking close-up photos of these because a lot of people, you see beautiful hillsides of orange color, and they're looking at the masses of these, and often you miss the nice details of these flowers when you get the orange striping in the center of them. Just a really nice flower. The problem with them is that they're on a fairly tall stem, and it's almost always breezy in in Bear Valley, I'm sorry. And so they blow around a lot, so they're harder to get pictures of. Okay, larkspur. Larkspur, there's 4 species at least of larkspur in the area, and the purple ones are a little bit difficult to distinguish. I'm fairly certain I've got royal larkspur. You need to look at the leaves, you need to look at the habitat they're in, and some of the finer structure. The pale western larkspur, that one stands out. It's one of it's the only white larkspur in the area that I'm aware of. Again, grassland areas. I'll see more of this in the hilly part as we're moving into the valley. Okay, next slide. Okay, so after you come down from the hills, you come out into the flat valley floor, and what you see every year can vary quite a bit. And I have a series of slides here that show over several years what you'll see on the valley floor, and you'll see different flowers predominate different years. That depends on the time of year you're there, it depends on the rainfall, it depends on the temperatures. So this is the valley floor looking towards the hills on the east. You get those sculpted little hills there. That was 2014. The next one, let's see, am I caught up with you? That's 2016. Not so much of the yellow, but you saw a lot of the cream cups, the white on the side. And I'm not 100% sure what the purple are on the right. I think they're sky lupin, but I'm not sure. Part of the problem is that you cannot go out into these pastures. So these are off in the distance from the road. Great for landscape shots, more difficult for identifying what the flowers are. So that was 2016. Then let's go to the next one. This is this year.
Charlie, before we get into this year, Harvey asked the question on whether the seeds will sit dormant for years, and are they just waiting for the right conditions?
Absolutely. Most of the plants we're looking at here in the valley floor are annuals. Annuals are very good about you'll get a massive bloom, set a lot of seeds, they'll drop the seeds there, and the seeds will wait for the proper conditions. Even with the proper conditions, they may not all germinate at the same time. So these annual plants like this are well adapted to the variable type of climate that we see in these areas, similar to what we see in vernal pools. Right conditions, right temperature, right rainfall, you get massive blooms like we did this year. To be honest with you, almost every year we have, if you hit it right, we have a massive bloom of something out there in the valley. This is a very consistent place to go to. There have been some years when there just wasn't a great bloom out there, but more often than not, we'll see something like that. This particular year, I thought it was going to be a really bad year because it was so dry in February, but then in March we got a lot of rains, and that freshened up brought out a lot of these annuals. And this year it kind of we had a compressed season, so a lot of these different plants that might have bloomed at different times all tended to bloom at the same time. They want to get out there. Yeah, it's wet, let's get out there and do some work and produce seeds, because they know they have a very short growing season. So there's sky lupin and goldfields and cream cups, tidy tips, all kinds of wonderful flowers out there. Now this is looking towards the west, so that's Walker Ridge rising up there, which is heavily serpentine soils up there. Okay, next slide. Now we're looking at plants we found in the valley floor, a different calicortus, a large flowered star tulip, which is somewhat rare in California, a little bit of affinity for serpentine soils. Even though you can't get into a lot of these pastures, these were flowers we found right along the edge of the road, right essentially in the ditch and along the fence line. So there's a lot of opportunities as you drive through here to pull over and look for flowers without having to go out into the fields. I'm pretty excited about finding that one this year. Next slide. Poppies. These are photos from prior years. This is 2014. This year, there weren't very many California poppies out there. It just wasn't the right conditions for them. Other years, there's a roadside ditch on the right, just masses of poppies. If you look at that center bottom photo and you look at the bottom of it, of the flowers and the seed pods, you see there's like a little collar there, a little platform. And that's one of the key features for identifying the California poppy as being different than the foothill poppy that I showed you earlier. The foothill poppy doesn't have that collar underneath it. So that's a very important diagnostic feature. If you're just taking pictures from the top, like that upper left photo, you can't guarantee what kind of poppy you have. I spent a lot of time trying to get the perfect picture of a poppy, but the colors are so intense, it's very difficult to not have them just blow out your sensor on your camera. Okay. Getting down to small flowers. These flowers, the flowers themselves are a couple of millimeters across, much less than a 1/4 inch across. Whisker brush and true baby stars, little puffy balls with the flowers coming out. The massive difference between these two, you see the one on the right there's kind of a pink spot at the base of the petals, and the one on the left doesn't have that pink spot. So that's one of the key features to tell the difference between these two. Also the head, the one on the right is hairier than the one on the left, although you don't see that in these photos. Those are fun. You can get masses of these, and they stand out quite a bit. If there's a few scattered around, they're easy to miss because they're such small plants. Okay. I threw this one in. This is a non-native winter vetch, also called hairy vetch. We start to see that. Fortunately, we don't see as much of that out there because of the way they manage the grazing, and because this isn't really happy with serpentine soils. But I did want to throw in a few non-natives in here so we can see what you might see. Okay, next one. A couple of these you'll see out in the pastures. These are ones you'll see a lot of places in California. Purple sanicle and common yarrow. Not unusual not unique. A lot. Okay, next. Okay, something just, excuse me a second, my monitor, something weird. There we go. Okay, so as you go zigzagging up through the valley, you come to a place, you come to a place, excuse me. You come to a place where you see this wildflower access point. So right on the road, the Keegan Ranch, folks there open this up during wildflower season. It's only open for, I'm not sure when they started, late March possibly. It's open for April into early May, though it's closed now, but the flowers are finished. So when the flowers are going, you can walk through that gate into the pasture. Keep in mind this is a working ranch. There's often cattle out there. Wear your old pants if you're going to be kneeling down a lot, because their cattle have been there quite a bit. But this is farther up the valley. A lot of people don't get this far up the valley, but you want to go here because this is where you get to go and get right up close to the flowers. That's one of the Bear Valley Buttes up there to the north. You'll see that a lot of people that take pictures in Bear Valley, you'll see that butte in there. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, cream cups. In some of the earlier photos, we saw big bands of white. That was cream cups. Some years that wildflower access point, masses and masses of cream cups. This year we didn't see as many of the cream cups. We saw a lot of other flowers there. Cream cups is really one of my favorite ones to photograph. It's a very delicate. Those flowers are maybe 2 inches across, maybe a little less depending on certain. They are a serpentine-loving plant. Really, really fun one. Next slide, please. Owl's clover, which is something we'll find through a lot of places in California. Some years, big masses of owl's clover here. This year we found just a few. This is an indication that shows you, these slides show you that you can't just go by flower color to identify flowers, because both of these are the same species. One's a purple variant and one's the white variant. The purple one's the more common one, but they're the same species of plant. I really like finding them here because we can get they're fairly robust plants, and we get a good chance to get up close to them. This year didn't see a lot of them there though. Next slide, please. What you'll see a lot of almost every year are tidy tips. There's at least 4 species of tidy tips in the valley. Tidy tip species are usually very difficult to differentiate. You have to look underneath the flower head. You have to sometimes look at internal structures. You have to pull it apart and see what's going on inside. Smooth tidy tips is found only in California. The coastal tidy tips is all along the West Coast, tends to be more in the mountains in the coastal area, the coastal range. The woodland tidy tips, which is also found only in California, some years that is the major tidy tip species out there. You'll see big pastures full of these. They don't have the white tips, but they're still in the tidy tip family. Next slide, please. Red maids, something we'll see throughout California. For whatever reason, the spot that I tend to see them is at this ranch, and that may just be because that's the place I get to, as far as in Bear Valley, that's the one place you get to go in there and get down on your hands and knees and look at things. So it may be found in other areas. This is an interesting plant just from the standpoint of, this is the reason why you can't just go out early in the morning, because they close up at night, and we won't see these showing up until things get warmed up later in the day. So sometimes my wife and I will hike into an area, and oh, there's not much blooming here. And then when we hike out later in the day, we'll say, oh, look, there's red maids, there's more red maids, there's some red maids over there, because they open up. Those flowers are, a 1/4 inch or so, fairly small. Next, please. Oops, I'm having a hard time keeping in parallel with you sometimes. There we go. Bird's eye gilia. In Bear Valley, I find this on the ranch in the valley floor, which is interesting because we tend to think of this as a grassland slopes type of plant. Most of the time, in the coastal range, you'll see them on hillsides. For some reason, there it is right there in the valley floor, and I don't find it in hillsides. Not a serpentine plant, so I'm not sure why we see so much of it there. It's interesting because the blue pollen, sometimes Roxanne noted that the insects that visit this will actually get coated with blue pollen, so it's kind of fun to see them. Those are fairly small flowers individually, but usually you get a big head of them, so they stand out quite a bit. Very, very pretty plant. Those photos are all taken there at the ranch. Next slide, please. Goldfields. Goldfield species are very difficult to tell apart. You have to look at internal structures. You have to look at the habitat. There's 4 or 5 species, probably 5 species of goldfields in the valley. The yellow ray goldfields is the one that I more commonly see on the ranch there at the Wildflower view spot. It's a little bit larger one that's going to be 1 inch across. Yellow ray goldfields or smooth goldfields. Earlier, when we were talking about coming through the foothills into the valley, we saw some hillsides that had masses of yellow, and my camera view there that has me labeled, that's a field of goldfields in the valley. Those are usually the California goldfields, which is a drier grassland species. It's hard to tell the California goldfields away from another species that's out there. You have to look at internal structures, but quite nice. It's a very common flower in many types of environments in Northern California, and they are an annual, and you get big, massive displays. They're very, very prolific. Next slide, please. Getting into a very rare plant, Jepson's milkfetch. This has a very high serpentine soil affinity. So if you find this, you're very likely to be in serpentine soils. I can't identify it to species based on this one photo. You have to look at the fruit and other features of it. That's a fairly small plant. That whole flower head, a quarter inch, maybe a little bit more, certainly less than a half-inch tall. Very, very pretty plant if you get down and look at it. There's a lot of different types of milk vetches, and this is one of your fairly rare ones. Next, please. Popcorn flowers. There's 5 or 6 species of popcorn flowers out in the Bear Valley area. There's 20 or 30 of them throughout Northern California. And these actually also in the same family as the fiddlenecks. You can't see the coiled head as much from these photos, but it does have that coiled head. To get these to species, you generally have to look at mature fruit. And keep in mind that the mature fruit are probably 1 millimeter across, and you have to look at this, whether they have spines, the spines that are hooked or spines that are straight, spines that have spines on the spines, things. It's really tough. The one in the center, the field popcorn flower, out in the drier areas, and that one, it's got those kind of rusty looking hairs to it. So that one's nice, easier to tell. The other two, I'm pretty sure are the Great Valley popcorn flower, Plagiobothris stipitatus. And in fact, I'm pretty sure they're Plagiobothris stipitatus subspecies or var or micranthus, just based on other factors that don't show in these flowers. The two, the one on the right and the left of the same plant, those flowers are, again, a couple millimeters across. You get big masses of them, they show up, but they can hide. Next. Oh, there's one that's almost exclusively on serpentine soils, cream sacks. 95% of the population of this is found on serpentine soils. It's a Castanea, so it's in the same genus as the paintbrushes. Those nice little puffy white flowers. The whole flower head is 4, 5, 6 inches tall at the most. Very pretty little plant. You have to get down and look at the really detailed structures of the flower before you can get it to species. A good indication, a good example of why you want to be paying attention to the soil types where you're identifying flowers, because some of these species will not grow on serpentine at all. This one, it really is most likely to be on serpentine. Next slide, please. Collection of non-natives. These are all there at the ranch. They're relatively tolerant of serpentines. Shepherd's purse, which, I mean, you could probably find that in your backyard, in your backyard garden. Clasping pepperweed, where it comes up through the flower. This year was the first year I came across that one there. Just a slide just to talk about what types that we do have some non-natives there. Okay, next slide. I'm not going to have a lot on this, but if you continue up the valley, you can take the road up into Walker Ridge. So this is a view from Walker Ridge, which is the high serpentine area on the west side of Bear Valley, looking down into the valley. The far side is more shale and sandstone with some serpentine over there. This is a major serpentine area. There's a lot of very rare plants that are found up here. I don't recommend going up here unless you are very ambitious, I guess. The road on this end, from the valley end, is very rough and rutted. We went up there. We don't have a four-wheel drive, but I probably should have had a four-wheel drive going up that road. The south end of the road is easier to access, but I've only been up there one time. This area is, we're concerned about this because there's a lot of endangered species up here, but it's being examined to be a wind farm up there, and we're worried about, as they put the wind farm in there, they have to do a lot of road work, and there's a lot of danger there. It's interesting because they've tried to put wind farms up there multiple times over the last couple of decades, and they've all failed, so I'm not sure why they're trying there again. But
Charlie, there's a question from Brian asking about riparian fencing and whether it's a possibility down there in the valley.
Repairing or riparian fencing?
Riparian, yep.
I'm not sure what you mean by riparian fencing.
Brian, can you give a little bit more?
You can see Bear Creek off in the distance, way on that stripe going sideways over there. Fencing to keep the cattle out of the creek. Yeah. That's one of the major sources of water for the cattle. So I'm not sure that there's a lot of interest in the ranchers in doing that. I can't really say much about that because I have not been in conversation with the ranchers of the area. All of that valley floor there is the private property on the ranches. So, you know, I really don't have much that I can say there. The species of plants that we're concerned about from a botany conservation standpoint aren't really down in the creek. That's not something that's a unique habitat from that standpoint. But I really don't have much I can say about that. Going up into, I have a few flowers from up in pictures from the Walker Ridge. California snowdrop bush, good sized bush, is found only in California. If you go to the next one, twining snake lily, which is was in the same genus as your blue dicks. This flower, this picture doesn't show it, but twining snake lily is a very appropriate name. That stem comes up, it's like a vine, it twists around whatever plant it's standing next to and come up there. And then you get these beautiful heads of flowers. And that's a fun flower that we found up on Walker Ridge. Next one. Scythe leaf onion, another onion. This is a very high affinity for serpentine soils. We'll find that in a number of places in California and up down into Baja California, I believe. And we'll find a lot of that. If you look in the background, you see those kind of greenish rocks and stuff back there. Those are serpentine rocks. That's very typical of that kind of rock. Next one, another Calicornis Mariposa lily. That's a fairly common grassland one. I wouldn't use that as typical of Walker Ridge, but we found a number of them up there. So there's a nice picture there. You'll find that in a lot of grasslands in California. Next slide, please. Douglas's golden violet. I was very surprised to find that this is actually a serpentine-loving violet. There's a lot of violets in California. You have to look at the leaves. You sometimes even have to look at the roots, which makes it hard to identify some of these if you don't want to dig them up. A good indicator for this one is that it's on serpentine, because most of them don't like serpentine. quite a few of those up on Walker Ridge. Next slide, please. Brewer's milkvetch, a fairly somewhat rare plant found up there on Walker Ridge. I can't prove that this is Brewer's milkvetch. I believe it is, but you need to see fruit, and I don't have pictures of fruit from this picture, so there's a possibility this is another one, but of the milkvetches that look like this, it's the only one that's been identified in the area. Next one. Okay. Now, true confessions. This shot and the next shot, I didn't take these photos on Walker Ridge. I took them in an area that's near Walker's Ridge, further to the west. But this is the Adobe lily. This is one that a lot of people don't see when they go to Bear Valley. It is a fairly serpentine tolerant plant, but it blooms much earlier than the big displays of annual flowers down in the valley floor. Usually the annual displays are April, and this is something that's blooming in February and March. So a lot of people don't see it. I've not seen it in Bear Valley because I don't get there early enough, because often the roads are kind of tough to get in. But just a little bit further, Indian Valley Reservoir, which is just to the west, and on into some of the areas over in Lake County, you'll find these. Very beautiful, fairly rare, pretty rare plant. And the next one, Purdy's Fiddlery. Again, this is, there's a lot of these being recorded in Walker Ridge. You can see that it likes serpentine because that's a big pile of serpentine rocks there. That is probably, what, 2-3 inches tall, the whole plant. Beautiful little plant. This is the first year I've come across that, a somewhat rare plant. Very beautiful bulb. Again, this is something that's going to be blooming in late February and early March. And with that, that's what we have. There's the Bear Valley Butte on the Keegan Ranch with a lot of gold fields and tidy tips. We are going to make you, Nate, you recorded this, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so then this, you don't have to write, I put a bunch of addresses here of things to look at, but you can get that from this slideshow when he publishes that. Also, you can email me, and we'll have the email a little bit later. There's some information about Walker Ridge. There's some information about serpentine soils. Soil Web is a resource that I've recently found. It's an amazing resource because you can look anywhere in the United States down and see what type of soil types are found in a particular location. And in fact, there's an app for your phone. So if you're out in the field, you can actually say, what soil type do we have right where I am? And it gives you an incredible amount of detail about what the soils are. And I have a website, ibreakforwildflowers.com. If you go there, there's a link, there's a menu link on the left side that says Wildflower Hikes. And hopefully in a few days, I'll have all of these photos posted there. I was planning on having it done by today, but things got in the way. And but I do have, that's where I post a lot of my flower pictures, and I post articles about places to go to hike to see wildflowers.
Great. So thank you all for joining us. Charlie, thank you very much for sharing your pictures. Roxanne, thank you for sharing your pictures. Again, here's Charlie's contact information, email, and website. If you want to get in touch with me, there's my email and the Tuleyome website. Charlie had the Bear Valley link on the previous slide. If you just go to the Tuleyome website, which is tuleyome.org, up at the top you see a couple of different options. One of them is Discover, and in there there's a trail guide. There's lots of popular trails in the area, and included in that is the Bear Valley Wildflower Tour. Like Charlie said, the best time to go is in the springtime when you can get out there. We don't have anything for this year, obviously, but next year we are hoping to have an in-person Bear Valley Wildflower Tour. So be on the lookout for when next year rolls around and we can get big groups back together. Also, if you go to the Tuleyome webpage, on the very upper right side, you'll see a donate button. If you enjoyed this, please think of donating to us. Right now through May, we have a $27,000 donor or long-term donor and board match. So if you donate till the end of May, then you get to double your money. So please think of us to do that. Thank you again for joining us. Like Charlie said, this will be up on our YouTube channel next week sometime after I can trim it down and make it look pretty. So check that out. That's youtube.com, and then search Tuleyome. We have next Thursday night, there's an online lecture on tricolored blackbirds. Bob Meese will be speaking there. So if you go to the Tuleyome webpage, tuleyome.org/events, you'll see on there the online Nature and You lecture. So you can sign up and get the Zoom information for that, kind of like what you did for this. So Charlie, do you have anything else that you would like to say?
No, just if someone, thank you very much for the opportunity to present this. And if anyone wants some of those links and stuff, you can email me at the address that's there.
Fantastic. So thank you all. I hope you enjoyed it, maybe learned something, and we will see you next time. Thank you all. Bye.